Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Marvin Vettori to defeat Jared Cannonier using mainly volume. All right. I'm here to talk about the whole event and give you my thoughts. Marvin Vettori versus Jared Cannonier. My main takeaway is Jared Cannonier looked phenomenal. This is about as good as he's ever looked. You could argue he's got better victories. Anderson Silva with the leg kicks and whatever. This knockout, that knockout. This was his finest performance, in my opinion. He separated himself from other guys that have beaten Marvin Vettori, who are only the best fighters, at least in the last few years. And he looked amazing here. Came as close as anybody's come to getting Vettori out of there. And even though he wasn't able to, he still excelled in a 5-round fight, set records. I don't pay attention to the records. It was something with the middleweight division or whatever the fuck. But whatever they tell me, I'll believe them because I know what I saw, and it was as good as Cannonier's ever looked. Just really phenomenal. He throws extra hard punches, which takes extra energy out of you. And he has shown on 2 occasions now against guys that are workhorses that he can fight hard for 5 rounds. Really fucking hard. He was going tooth and nail with Strickland. That was a very competitive fight, and he still was fighting to the bitter end. But here against Vettori, you could argue of course, it is easier to fight for 5 rounds when you're winning. But he still excelled, even for guys that are dominant in 5-round performances. They're never like this. And this was an exceptional win for Jared Cannonier. I want to say he's a new contender. I know he fought Adesanya, but he and Vettori too, they're guys that I didn't want to see get back to fighting Adesanya. I didn't like their fights. I think Adesanya's got their numbers and it's likely to go to a decision. But I'm much more interested in seeing Cannonier fight Adesanya now, and Whitaker especially, and everybody else. He's only been beaten by those 2 at middleweight, really. And his chin, everything else looks amazing so far at 39 years old. His cardio, his volume, his power. I know he's not always going to be the volume guy in fights, but here he was able to be. And again, he looked better than just about everybody who's the volume guy in a fight. So exceptional performance from Cannonier. New contender has reemerged, or I should say a contender has reemerged. And for Vettori, he looked as tough as he's ever looked. He looked as tough as he's ever going to look, hopefully. He took another ass kicking, but man, that guy is insanely tough to put down. Insanely tough to put down. And this was one where I thought if Cannonier has him hurt, he can do it. But he just wasn't able to do it. Vettori is that fucking tough. So he's got that to take away from this fight. But otherwise, this was a contender separating himself from another contender. These guys were around the same spot. I don't know the rankings, but they don't belong next to each other, And second fight, Arman Tsarukyan takes out Joaquim Silva. Arman Tsarukyan really impressed me here. I could see you not being impressed, but he really impressed me here. He got the finish in the final minute, and it was at least 3/4 of the way to being a knockout, even though it's ruled as a TKO. He was pretty much there. And he was dominant in this fight, but he was clipped. He was clipped at the end of round 2. That's something you're going to hear me mention the next time. He was knocked silly by Joaquim Silva. I don't know if he was knocked silly, but he lost that round on all 3 judges' cards, by the way. I don't think they know what they're talking about. That's definitely an example of recency bias, where that happened at the end. I feel like if that happened in the opening seconds of the fight, of the round, it would have just been, a consensus victory for Arman Tsarukyan. But Tsarukyan, look, he's a guy that is very comfortable fighting long fights. He's arguably more of a point fighter, a better point fighter. And he's got that style that's very conducive to point fighting, relentless pace, excellent wrestling, and, just overall skill everywhere. He's really slick on the feet and on the ground. But here, he was on his way to winning a point battle after being hurt, and he put his foot on the gas and got the TKO, which again was very close to a knockout in the final minute of that fight. Excellent performance on paper for Sarukian. The fact that he was hurt and whatever, I feel like only makes it more impressive. Just more questions that have been answered. But yeah, your takeaway is your takeaway. I was impressed with Sarukian. Armen Petrosyan, I was really impressed with Armen Petrosyan. He looked really effective here. You know, kind of made Christian Leroy Duncan look very limited, in my opinion. Christian Leroy Duncan definitely wins the spinning shit battle, but Petrosyan wins the fundamental battle, and that's what we saw. He won with fundamentals. He was just a much more fundamentally sound fighter, and I think that threw Christian Leroy Duncan off from the beginning. He just looked a little out of his element. Petrosyan was just outworking him, outstriking him, laser sharp, and really tough to bully around. Petrosyan was just better everywhere, really. You know, I thought this was a very clean victory, and even if he's a guy that is gearing himself to being more of a point fighter at the UFC level, because he's had plenty of finishes throughout his career, his short career, but here he's had plenty of decisions lately. But he looks like an excellent point fighter, Armen Petrosyan. And even in his losses, you know, he's looked durable. You know, well, aside from the one knockout loss on the regional scene, but against Caio Bahayo, he looked durable. You know, very impressive that he was able to survive on the ground. This guy's more than just a striker, but he's an excellent fucking striker. And yeah, his one loss on the regional scene was a clean knockout in a minute to, you know, more of a brawler. It happens. Lucas Almeida and Pat Sabatini, this was domination. This was a very impressive win for Sabatini. I guess it's his most impressive win in the UFC so far. He got the finish in round 2, ground and pound into an arm triangle. Looked phenomenal. But what made this impressive is it was much more thorough than the Jamal Emmers fight, in which he was dropped and then heel hooked him all in like 30 seconds. Which that's very impressive in its own right, and Jamal Emmers is an excellent fighter. But so is Lucas Almeida, I think. Just Pat Sabatini was that dominant of a wrestler where he's able to get in on those hips and, you know, get underneath Lucas Almeida. He's a big, long, tall guy, and Sabatini was just a bad matchup for him. You know, once he got inside, he was a much stronger man, won the physicality battle, and ripped him to the mat every which way and strangled him at the end of round 2, or in the middle of round 2, whatever. Excellent performance from Pat Sabatini. Great way to come back after that shit loss to Damon Jackson. Not that it was, you know, anything shitty about it. I'm just saying, you know, it sucked. He got finished in a few minutes. But, yeah, great win for him, and tough loss for Lucas Almeida. This was hopefully an eye-opening loss. You know, Pat Sabatini was just too much for him, and he didn't have much of an answer. Took an ass-kicking and then got choked. Manuel Torres knocked out Nicholas Mota. I really like Manuel Torres. I think he's got a very bright future as a fighter. I can't wait to see him fight next. But my primary takeaway from this fight has to be Nicholas Mota's chin is garbage. It's gone, which really sucks because he's an excellent striker. And he was in Torres' face early on. But, yeah, his chin, as, you know, I speculated on before the fight, that, you know, I didn't trust his chin. Now, I don't trust it at all. You know, he could be fighting Ronnie Yahya in his next fight. I'll bet on Ronnie Yahya by knockout. And I know they're in different weight classes, but still, you get the point. Still, Torres looked awesome. You know, he did what he needed to do. Looked powerful and fucking violent. Even if he was, you know, I don't want to say he was being overwhelmed. There wasn't enough time for him to be overwhelmed. But I thought Mota was doing well, leading the dance there. Nicholas Dalby beat Muslim Salikov. This was an example of Nicholas Dalby being a workhorse. You know, he's a guy who, I think I went over his record for round 3s in the pre-fight video. If not, maybe I did that last time. But he wins most of his round 3s. The guy is a workhorse. He's always been a cardio machine. I'll always go back to his 3rd round against Darren Till, where he made that fight a draw by beating the shit out of Darren Till after Darren Till won 2 rounds. But here he was just he was the younger man by 1 year. They're 38 and 39. But he took over this fight. Muslim Salikov was falling off after round 1. Nicholas Dalby doesn't go anywhere. He's a workhorse, and he can work everywhere, too. I really was impressed with Nicholas Dalby here. I think He looked very good against a guy that could have been a bad matchup for him. You know, Salikov's taken out a lot of great fighters in the UFC, and Dalby separated himself here. Did a great job. Alessandro Costa beat Jimmy Flick. This was, an ass kicking pretty much. Jimmy Flick landed a few strikes, but didn't have too many big moments at all here. The leg kicks started taking over the fight for Costa. He was beating Jimmy Flick up so badly with the leg kicks, and then Jimmy Flick didn't have a leg to stand on, and even on the ground, he didn't have much to offer. Costa just pounded the shit out of him. And didn't stop. And Jimmy Flick couldn't move around, and he was caught and overwhelmed. Sucks for Jimmy Flick because I love watching that guy fight, but I feel like maybe he should have just retired, I feel like, I think he said it was family shit and whatever, but I remember speculating when he retired that he had been knocked out plenty of times and just thinking it was a part of it, that he knew he wasn't long for the sport. And here at the UFC level, it's all killers, and these are all dangerous guys. And, that's his weakness. He's one of those guys where he could lose another 10 fights, and at least 8 of them will be by TKO. At least 8, Decision, submission, very rarely will anybody beat him by either one of those. It's going to be knockouts. So, and TKO is all the same. It's just concussive brain damage are coming. He's definitely not long for the UFC, in my opinion. I don't want to shit all over the guy because I love submission art, especially crafty guys like that. But, some guys just, they're more vulnerable. It is what it is. I'd be too big of a pussy to even try MMA. But a great win for Costa. This is another TKO win of his. He's only got a few of those. I think this might have been his 4th or whatever. But he's dangerous everywhere. Really dangerous. He showed to be dangerous on the feet here, but on the ground, he pounded the shit out of him. And, ferocious fighter. Can't wait to see him fight everybody. And again, that loss to Amir Albazi, that's to one of the best fighters in the world, number 2 or 3 or whatever, and it was on short notice. And it took him till round 3 to get put out. Kwang Ho Kang takes out Christian Quinones. This was very impressive. Really impressed me, Kwang Ho Kang. I knew he had it in him to get a submission. That's why I bet on it on round 2 and 3. Down the stretch, as I like to say, because I'm a jerk off. But Kwang Ho Kang, he didn't. I don't think he took him down at all. Maybe technically, but he knocked him down. He knocked him into the submission realm, and that's where he took over the fight. He caught him coming in, which Christian Quinones, I really like his striking from the outside and whatever, all offensively. But here he left himself open. And, he's a guy that, he's got to protect himself. And he got cold by a guy that's a much more seasoned fighter. Kwang Ho Kang, at least he's in the UFC. He's been in the UFC for 10 years. I know it's been on and off. But he is a very skilled, dangerous fighter everywhere. And what better way to prove it than to club and sub somebody? He clubbed him and he subbed him. Great win for him. Tough loss for Quinones. Carlos Hernandez beats Dennis Bondar by technical decision. Look, I never want to make the story about my bet or whatever, my bets. Only when I lose do I want to talk about my bets. But here, it just worked out. It just worked out. Carlos Hernandez was the primary bet. He was going to win anyway. But I also played decision and then submission and decision. Because Carlos Hernandez has never knocked anybody out. And then with 10 seconds left, he rips him to the mat. Or 5 seconds left. Slams him to the mat. And they did bump heads. It was incidental, but he did knock him half dead with the headbutt. And then he smashed him with elbows and knocked him out with 1 second left. And my first reaction was, yeah, fuck. That was the money line and then the prop bets. And then they ruled it a technical decision because it happened after the 2.5 minute mark of round 3. I think that's the rule. So it goes to a technical decision if there's a no contest or whatever at that point in the fight or after that point in the fight. You can tell I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but I'm close. And that's what happened. And Hernandez, look, he was winning the points battle anyway. He looked amazing in this fight. Sticking him with the jab, had great movement, and better power than even I considered. I thought, well, he showed to be violent in the end, and it's not like he knocked Bondar down, but still, he can throw. And I thought he was dominating the fight in a sense, at least winning all the rounds. But in the end, with 1 second left, the prop bets get screwed. It's his first TKO, and it was violent. But they ruled a fucking no contest, goes to a technical decision. He gets the victory, and I win like fucking $42 or whatever. No, but it was just very fortuitous the way it fucking worked out. And usually it's the other way, where you're screaming, fuck! But great win nonetheless. He doesn't get the credit for the knockout, which I know he really wanted, but he does get the credit for the violence. Everybody's going to remember what he did there, and it's a new wrinkle to Carlos Hernandez. He looked like a violent son of a bitch in that moment. I know he was knocked half dead, but still, that slam was pretty violent. And for Bondar, yeah, this was he lost the points battle here. He was outgunned, in my opinion, and cardio-wise as well. But in the end, a headbutt's a headbutt. He didn't deserve to get the finish loss. Still, it makes him look more vulnerable because, he was separated from his senses there. Hopefully he doesn't fight in 40 days like Jared Gordon was going to. Teresa Bleda versus Gabby Fernandez. This was a dominant performance from Teresa Bleda. Gabby Fernandez is a big, strong girl, and she's definitely got a lot of skills everywhere, but she's limited on the ground. She's just limited. She's a girl that she's not comfortable off her back. And I know she hit in her first fight. She triangled Yasmin Lucindo and then pounded her out from the full mount. That was slick as fuck. But in general, she can be taken down and controlled. We've seen that. Even though Teresa Bleda and Jasmine Jasdavicius are maybe the two biggest girls in the division, they're insanely similar, and their competition is very similar now. Both girls haven't fought Natalia Silva as well. But both girls fought Gabby Fernandez, and they took her down, and she didn't have much of an answer. She reclaimed her guard once. She couldn't dig with the underhook and, scoop her hips out. She kept, she was dominated. She was controlled. And Bleda did a lot of controlling from half guard. That's where she was really pinning her down and sucking the life out of her. But once some of the life was sucked out of her, she was advancing the mount. And Bleda is very, very, very dangerous from the full mount. But here, I think it's almost a nice new wrinkle to her. The fact that she was able to fight more of a controlled mount, because she's gotten overzealous and conceded position a few times throughout her short career. So here she showed to have good control over Gabby Fernandez. She didn't get overzealous, and she secured the victory. Was a great performance from Teresa Bleda. She figured out Gabby Fernandez and just kept striking her way into beautiful takedowns and dominated her. Dan Argueta tapped out Ronnie Lawrence. No, he didn't tap him out. He had his hand floating. It was one of those phantom taps, but he was about to tap. And then, no, he didn't tap. And look, you know what? He didn't tap. Dan Argueta was going to win that fight. I think he was going to win by submission in another second. Maybe 2 seconds. But he still didn't tap. It looked like he was going to, but he didn't. So, he's got a case there, okay? And, what's his name there? Peterson pulled his hand or whatever, and, Dominic Cruz was all over it. He smells like cigarettes and booze. No, but look, he made a mistake. He owned up to it immediately. I don't think it was that egregious, because he saw the hand there too. He was like, all right, just tap. Just fucking tap and I'll stop it. But he wouldn't tap. He was thinking about tapping. Regardless, the primary takeaway from this fight is that Dan Argueta's fucking awesome. I thought he was awesome in his loss to Damon Jackson, up a weight class on short notice, and surviving with that dangerous fucking jiu-jitsu monster on top of you and backpacking you. He looked good against Nick Aguirre. Here he looked phenomenal. He leveled up. He was going to be putting Ronnie Lawrence away in round 1, in my opinion. And even before that, he won the scramble. I know he's a D2 wrestler or whatever, but he won the scramble. He was out wrestling Ronnie Lawrence, and he looked fucking awesome doing so. I really want to see this guy fight again. hopefully they run this back if that's the plan. And if not, hopefully they get both these guys back in the octagon soon. And certainly Dan Argueta, because he was denied a bonus, a winner's purse, and, you know, the win on his record. But still, we all saw what we saw, much like with Carlos Hernandez and whoever the hell else I was talking about before. Dan Argueta is a dangerous guy, and my estimation of him as a fighter has skyrocketed. Modestas Bukauskas beats Zach Pauga by decision. It was close. I thought they got this one wrong. I thought Pauga should have won. I scored round 1 and round 3 for Pauga, and I was really impressed with him in round 3. He's a guy that's older, 35. Bukauskas, I think, is 29. And Pauga was hurt badly. Both guys were hurt, but Pauga was hurt badly, more so, I think. And he was the one that put his foot on the gas in round 3, bit down on his mouthpiece and really went for it. And that's what made me side with him. But it was close, and Bukauskas was very effective at range, better movement. Although, again, just aggressive movement by Pauga helped make up for that. And, leading the dance. He was the one pressuring him. But Bukauskas was very effective as well and landed some beautiful shots on Pauga, some beautiful counters. I believe he dropped him with the same punch that Mo Usman landed in the first round, like a beautiful counter jab, maybe a counter hook halfway in between. And I thought he had him figured out, but Pauga had an answer. His chin was there for him, and he showed to be a very gritty fighter. So my estimation of him as a fighter has also skyrocketed. I don't know about skyrocketed, but it's jumped. But he gets the loss here. Bukauskas gets the victory. He fought well enough to put himself in the realm of winning a decision, and it went his way. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.